The transport bus rolled to the final checkpoint just after sunrise, its steel frame rattling like old bones. Stonewater Correctional Facility sat at the edge of the city like a forgotten scar. Concrete towers, razor wire, and watch lights that hummed even during the day. It was the kind of place built to swallow men whole and chew whatever pieces were left. Inside the bus, a dozen inmates stared through barred windows with a hollow acceptance of men who already knew what awaited them. Some whispered, some clenched fists, some prayed softly into their sleeves. But one man sat in the very back, silent and straight-backed, as if he refused to lean on anything for support. His name was Darius Holt. Black, tall, lean but solid, eyes steady enough to unsettle even the guards who had cuffed him. He wore his jumpsuit with the posture of someone who didn't understand the word defeated, and that posture alone annoyed the correctional officers escorting him. When the bus hissed to a stop at Stonewater's intake gate, Guard Peterson smirked and jabbed a thumb toward the back. Time to join the real world, Captain America. Darius didn't react, didn't glare, didn't frown, didn't even blink. He simply rose with the calm precision of a man trained to move with purpose. He stepped off the bus, ignoring the other inmates who glanced at him with curiosity. People always stared at Darius Holt, not because he was loud, not because he was dangerous, but because he looked like the kind of man who knew exactly who he was. Even here, the intake area buzzed with the usual chaos. Officers shouting orders, handcuffs clattering, new inmates shaking under fluorescent lights that never softened. Guard Simmons scanned the paperwork, clipped to a folder, and frowned. "You're Holt, right?" "Yes," Darius replied. Simmons skimmed the page. Assault on a federal contractor. Resisting arrest, destruction of property. Huh. He raised an eyebrow. "You don't look like the type." Darius didn't answer. He kept his shoulders straight and his hands visible, the way someone does when they've been trained not to escalate situations that could end in seconds. The guard shrugged and shoved the folder at Peterson. "Block D. Put him with the rest of the tough guys." Peterson sneered. "Welcome to the jungle, Holt." As Darius walked to the main corridor, inmates peered out from behind cell bars. Some smirked, sizing him up. Others nodded quietly, feeling something familiar, a presence that reminded them of men who walked war zones, not prison blocks. But the guards didn't see any of that. They only saw a quiet black man with paperwork that suggested violence. And nothing enraged insecure men more than a quiet black man who refused to look afraid. Guard Tanner, the worst of them all, spotted Darius immediately. Tanner was the kind of officer who enjoyed power the way other men enjoy nicotine, addictively, carelessly, constantly. He strutted toward Darius with a smirk carved into his face. Well, fresh meat," Tanner said, tapping his baton against his palm. "What's with the posture, Holt? Stand up straight, like you're still saluting someone." Darius didn't respond. Tanner stepped closer. "Hello? I'm talking to you." Simmons muttered under his breath. "Leave it, Tanner." But Tanner never left it. He pushed Darius in the chest. Not hard enough to injure him, but hard enough to disrespect him. Darius remained unmoved, not because he was intimidated, but because he learned a long time ago that reacting to ignorance only fed it. Tanner's smirk faded. "Oh, you think you're better than the rest of these animals?" Darius lifted his eyes, calm, focused, unshaken. "I don't think anything," he said softly. "I'm just here to do my time." The simplicity of the statement made Tanner angrier than any insult could have. "Don't get smart with me." He shoved Darius again. Harder. This time the other guards paused to watch. Darius didn't move an inch. Tanner's voice rose. "When I push you, you stumble. When I tell you to speak, you answer. That's how this place works." Darius looked him dead in the eye. Respect is not obedience. A ripple went through the inmates nearby, the kind of reaction men have when someone says something they wish they had the courage to say. Tanner's face twisted. "Oh, you're one of those. Think you're above the system, huh?" He leaned in close, voice low and venomous. "I don't care who you were outside. In here I'm God." Darius stayed steady. "You're a man doing a job. That's all." For a second, Tanner's jaw locked. Then something snapped. He grabbed Darius by the collar and slammed him against the wall. The thud echoed through the corridor. Inmates sucked in breath. Simmons swore under his breath. Even Peterson flinched. But Darius did not flinch, did not struggle, did not lift a hand. He simply stood there, allowing Tanner to embarrass himself in front of the entire block. Tanner's breath shook against his ear. "I'll break you." Darius's voice was calm. "You can't break what you didn't build." Tanner stormed off, enraged at the lack of reaction. Simmons shook his head and muttered, "You're crazy for talking back to him." Darius didn't reply. He didn't need to, because somewhere deep in his posture, in the controlled way he inhaled and exhaled, there was a truth no one here had the clearance to understand. Darius Holt wasn't just disciplined. He was trained to endure pressure, trained to stay calm under threat, trained to walk into hostile environments without losing focus, trained to be a leader. Because before this prison jumpsuit, before the false charges, before Stonewater's gates closed behind him, Darius Holt had been Captain Holt, United States Army, Special Operations, decorated for leadership under fire. And the guard who just humiliated him? He had no idea who he had just put hands on. No idea what kind of man he had provoked. No idea what storm he had just woken up. Darius Holt settled into Stonewater like a man stepping into cold water. Calm, deliberate, accepting. He unpacked nothing except his state-issued kit, placed everything with military precision on the narrow shelf, and sat on his bunk with a straight-back posture of someone still wired to stand at attention. Inmates stole glances at him the way they did with new arrivals who looked too controlled to be ordinary. But Darius didn't seek attention. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He observed, learned, mapped the rhythm of the block like he'd mapped dangerous terrain his entire career. But Guard Tanner wasn't finished with him. If anything, the quiet made Tanner angrier. By midday, the entire block had heard about the new guy who stared Tanner down. Some laughed quietly. Others muttered that the man must not understand how Stonewater worked. But some of the older inmates watched Darius with a kind of knowing, like they recognized discipline when they saw it. Kai, a skinny inmate barely 23, approached Darius during lunch. He moved carefully, like someone approaching a sleeping lion. "You good?" Kai asked. Darius nodded. "I'm fine." "You didn't tell Tanner to back off." "That's new." Darius took a slow sip of water. Telling a man like that anything only adds fuel. Kai blinked. "You sound like someone who's been around this stuff." Darius didn't answer. Before Kai could ask more, Tanner entered the cafeteria. The room shifted instantly. Conversations dipped. Inmates lowered their heads. Tanner walked with that swagger officers had when they believed the facility existed to serve their ego. He spotted Darius at the center table and smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the smile of a man who still felt he had something to prove. Tanner marched straight toward him. Peterson muttered under his breath, "Here we go again." Tanner slammed his hand on Darius's table, rattling the trays. "Holt." Darius looked up slowly. "Officer Tanner." Tanner smirked. "Still got that pretty posture, huh?" A few inmates exchanged nervous glances. Tanner leaned down, voice dripping arrogance. "I reviewed your intake report. You really think anyone believes you're just some regular offender?" Darius remained silent. Tanner continued, "So what did you do? Resist too hard? Get upset? Throw a tantrum? You don't strike me as a man who sees consequences." Darius spoke evenly. "I am aware of consequences. That's why I avoid unnecessary conflict." Tanner's jaw twitched. "Unnecessary? You calling me unnecessary?" Darius didn't blink. "No, I'm saying there's no conflict here unless you create one." The cafeteria went silent. Every inmate was watching. Tanner took a step back, incredulous. "You think you're clever." "Not clever," Darius replied. "Honest." Tanner snorted. "You gonna talk like that all year? Because I promise you, I can fix that." Darius looked at him with the calm of a man who had seen worse than prison guards. "I don't need fixing." The simplicity of the statement hit Tanner harder than any insult. It was confidence, not ego, not defiance. Just confidence. Tanner couldn't stand it. He reached forward and slapped Darius's tray off the table. Food splattered across the floor. Kai flinched. A few inmates stiffened. Darius didn't move. His hand stayed on the table, steady, grounded. Tanner leaned close. "Pick it up." Darius turned his head slightly. I didn't drop it. The room froze. Tanner's nostrils flared. "You really want to make me mad, don't you?" "No," Darius said softly. "But I won't act beneath myself." Tanner's face turned red. Simmons approached cautiously. "Tanner, maybe ease up." Tanner snapped, "Shut up, Simmons." He grabbed Darius by the jumpsuit and yanked him to his feet. The force would have sent most men stumbling. But Darius's footing didn't budge. He rose smoothly, like being pulled didn't affect his center of balance at all. Tanner stepped in, crowding him. I said, "Clean it up." Darius's voice didn't change, and I said I didn't drop it. Kai whispered to a friend nearby, "Why isn't he scared?" The inmate whispered back, "Because he ain't normal." Tanner shoved him again. Hard enough that the room gasped. Hard enough that two inmates rose from their seats, unsure if a fight was about to erupt. But Darius didn't even sway. His boots remained planted. His spine remained straight. His breath remained slow. Tanner was the only one shaking. He stepped back, raising a fist. "You think I won't hit you?" Darius finally lifted his eyes fully. "No, I think you're hoping I hit you." Tanner blinked, thrown off. "What?" "You're trying to provoke a response," Darius said calmly, "because you want justification." Tanner's face crumpled with rage. "Say that again." But Darius only repeated, "You want justification." A deep silence cut through the room. Darius's calm wasn't normal. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't passivity. It was training. Tanner suddenly felt outmatched, not physically, but psychologically, and that made him even angrier. He shoved Darius again, but this time it wasn't controlled. It was sloppy, unstable. Darius caught the officer's wrist mid-shove, not tightly, not threateningly, just enough to stop the motion. Peterson's eyes widened. "Oh no." Tanner froze. Darius held the wrist steady. "Officer Tanner, you're escalating beyond your authority." The tone wasn't scared. It wasn't angry. It was a tone soldiers use when speaking to men who shouldn't be in charge. Tanner jerked his arm free. "Humiliated. Put him in solitary," he barked to Simmons, trying to regain control. "Now." Simmons hesitated, but he didn't. "Now." Tanner stormed off, humiliated by the fact that he couldn't dominate a man who didn't even raise his voice. Simmons and Peterson approached Darius carefully. "You good?" Peterson asked quietly. Darius nodded. "I'm fine." Simmons sighed. "We don't want to do this, but Tanner's on a power trip." "I understand," Darius said. He didn't resist. He didn't argue. He walked to solitary with the same calm stride he'd used walking into the facility. Inmates murmured as he passed. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't even blink. That guard scared of him. "Who is this dude?" Something's off. His balance, his calm, something military. Kai whispered, because he was something. As the cell door closed behind him, Darius finally allowed himself a quiet exhale. Long, controlled, deliberate. He knew exactly what had just happened. Tanner wasn't angry because Darius disrespected him. Tanner was angry because he sensed what Darius really was. Even without knowing the truth, Captain Darius Holt, United States Army, Special Operations Leader, a man trained to endure pressure most humans collapse under. Tanner thought he'd humiliated Darius Holt. Solitary confinement in Stonewater wasn't a punishment. It was a pressure chamber, a narrow concrete cell with no windows, a steel door with a slit barely wide enough for a food tray, and silence thick enough to choke a man who wasn't used to being alone. Most inmates lasted an hour before pacing, 2 before sweating, 4 before whispering to themselves. Darius Holt sat cross-legged on the cold floor like he'd been placed in a meditation room, not a prison cell. His breath was slow and measured. His spine never bent. He didn't count seconds or minutes or hours. He simply existed in the quiet, his mind organized, his control absolute, because Darius had been trained to survive worse than isolation. He'd survived nights behind enemy lines where every sound could mean death. Survived missions where sleep was optional and clarity mandatory. Survived battlefields where silence was the difference between life and loss. Solitary felt like a break compared to those. But outside the steel door, Stonewater wasn't quiet at all. Word of what happened in the cafeteria spread through the prison with wildfire speed. Inmates whispered about the tall, silent black man who didn't flinch when a guard shoved him. Those in Block D whispered the moment he caught Tanner's wrist mid-shove, a movement so quick and controlled that half the room missed it completely. He moved like a soldier. No, like special forces. You don't hold yourself like that unless you've seen real war. Tanner pushed him twice, and he didn't even sway. In prison, a man's reputation is currency. Darius had earned it without lifting a finger. Meanwhile, Tanner paced the guard quarters like a caged dog, replaying the cafeteria moment in his mind over and over. His face still burned with humiliation. His pride was the only thing he cherished, and Darius Holt had crushed it without violence, without anger, without even standing up. Simmons stood near the lockers, watching Tanner wear a trench into the floor. "Let it go, Tanner." Tanner glared. "I ain't letting a damn inmate make me look weak." "You already look weak," Peterson muttered. Tanner snapped his head toward him. "Say that again?" Peterson raised his hands. "Just saying, the guy didn't even touch you. That's the point." Tanner roared. "You didn't see his eyes. He thinks he's above us." Simmons sighed. "Or he's just trying to avoid trouble." Tanner shook with anger. "It's worse than that. He thinks he's better. And I'll prove he ain't." He stomped away, but his voice echoed down the hallway. "I'll break that military posture sooner or later." The word military lingered. Peterson raised an eyebrow. "Military? You think he—" Simmons cut him off. "I've seen soldiers. That man's got it written in his bones." When Darius was released from solitary 2 days later, Block D went silent as he walked down the hallway. Not in fear and curiosity, in respect, in confusion, in anticipation. He walked with the same controlled pace, stepping into Block like he was returning from a routine shift instead of isolation. His expression didn't betray anger, frustration, or resentment, only presence. Kai was the first to approach him. "You okay?" "Yes," Darius replied. "Solitary didn't mess with your head?" "No," Kai blinked. "How?" "Most people walk out shaking." Darius gave a small shrug. "I've been in worse." The answer only deepened the mystery. A few older inmates watched from their bunks. That's discipline. That's training. He's not built like the rest of us. Bruno Hayes, a thick, tattooed inmate with a scar across his cheek, leaned against the rails, studying Darius with renewed interest. Bruno wasn't friendly by nature, but he recognized a threat when he saw one, and Darius Holt was a threat he couldn't categorize. He pushed off the railing and approached. "You the guy who stood up to Tanner?" "I didn't stand up to him," Darius said. "I refused to fall." Bruno chuckled. "Same thing." He took a breath, then narrowed his eyes. "What's your story?" "No story," Darius answered. "Everybody's got a story," Bruno insisted. "Not one I intend to share." Bruno studied him another moment. "You ain't afraid of nothing, are you?" Darius shook his head. "Fear keeps you alive. I just don't let it control my actions." Bruno smirked. "You talk like a damn sergeant." Darius didn't correct him. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, Tanner wasn't done. That evening, he stormed into the control room, where Warden McBride stood reviewing paperwork. "Warden, Holt is a problem." McBride raised an eyebrow. "Problem how?" "He's disrespectful." "Meaning he didn't bow when you shouted?" McBride asked dryly. Tanner slammed his fist on the counter. "He looks at me like I'm nothing." McBride sighed. "Humiliation isn't a reason to escalate against an inmate." "You weren't there," Tanner said, voice rising. "He grabbed my wrist." McBride looked at him sharply. "Did he threaten you?" "No." "Did he strike you?" "No." "Did he resist orders?" "No, but then drop it," McBride said firmly. "Your pride is not part of prison protocol." Tanner seethed. McBride continued. Some men come here hiding more than a rap sheet. Holt is one of them. Whatever his past is, it's not our concern unless he becomes a threat. Tanner leaned forward, breathing hard. He's already a threat. How? McBride asked. Tanner opened his mouth, but he didn't have an answer. He had only fear. Back in Block D, Kai sat with Darius at the edge of the common area. His voice lowered as he asked, "Why won't you fight back?" Darius took a moment before answering. "Because if I start fighting," he exhaled slowly, "I don't know where it ends." Kai frowned. "You saying you're dangerous?" Darius looked at him, eyes calm but heavy. "I'm saying I was trained to end conflict, not start it." Kai studied him closely. "So you were military?" Darius didn't confirm it, but silence was confirmation enough. Behind them, Bruno's voice echoed from the stairs. "He's more than military." Kai looked over. "How do you know?" Bruno crossed his arms. "I knew a guy once. Ranger battalion. Walked like him. Talked like him. Controlled breathing. Watched every angle. Holt ain't no basic grunt." He pointed. "That man's got officer posture." Kai's eyes widened. "Like a captain?" Bruno shrugged. "Captain, lieutenant. Something big." Darius said nothing, but for the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face, and Bruno saw it. "I was right," Bruno said quietly. "You're not supposed to be here." Darius met his eyes. "I'm here because I protected someone who couldn't protect themselves." Bruno nodded slowly. "Then you don't belong in this place." Tanner chose that moment to walk into Block for a routine check. His eyes locked on Darius. Darius didn't look away. For a split second, just a split second, Tanner faltered, because in that moment, he finally understood. Darius Holt didn't fear him. Darius Holt didn't fear Stonewater. Darius Holt didn't fear solitary. The only thing Darius feared was himself, and Tanner had no idea how dangerous that made him. The tension between Darius Holt and Guard Tanner didn't fade after solitary. It grew, not loudly, not publicly, but in the quiet spaces inside the Block where Tanner's pride festered like an untreated wound. Every guard shift was a reminder Tanner hated. The memory of his wrist held still by a man who hadn't even exerted force. Darius hadn't fought him. Darius hadn't even glared. He had simply shown Tanner, without meaning to, that he was outmatched. And Tanner was the type of man who had never handled being outmatched. By the third day after Darius's release from solitary, Tanner's anger had fermented into something sharper. He watched Darius through corners, through reflections in windows, through monitors. Every time he saw that calm, upright posture, it scraped at something deep inside him. By lunchtime on the fourth day, Tanner snapped. The cafeteria hummed with the usual afternoon noise. Metal trays scraping, inmates arguing over seats, the clatter of boots echoing across concrete floors. Darius sat at his usual corner table with Kai, eating slowly, never rushing, never drawing attention. His body language didn't change no matter where he was. Calm, contained, observant. Kai picked at his food nervously. "I think Tanner's planning something," he whispered. "I know," Darius replied. Kai looked startled. "How?" "We didn't hear anything." "Haven't needed to," Darius said. "He's chosen his moments. His pacing changed. His eyes don't track the Block the same way. He's watching me, not the inmates." Kai stared. "How do you notice stuff like that?" Darius took a slow breath. "Training." Kai swallowed, realizing that when Darius said training, it never meant simple practice. It meant something else. Something heavier. Across the room, Tanner leaned against the wall near the guard station, drinking from a coffee cup he wasn't really interested in. His gaze stayed locked on one person, Darius Holt. Simmons stepped beside him. "Leave him be today, man." Tanner didn't blink. "He thinks he's the calmest man in this room." "He is," Simmons said plainly. "And that's what's eating you." Tanner's jaw tightened. "I need respect." "You need therapy," Simmons muttered and walked off. Tanner didn't hear it. Or maybe he did. Either way, it didn't matter. The moment Kai stood up to throw away his tray, Tanner made his move. He walked across the cafeteria with long, confident strides. Inmates noticed and grew silent, sensing conflict the way prey senses storms. Even the guards nearby stiffened. They'd seen Tanner angry before, but this felt different, meaner, more desperate. Tanner arrived at Darius's table and kicked the leg of the bench. Hard. The bench jerked. The trays rattled. But Darius didn't flinch. He didn't even look up immediately. He finished the bite of food he was chewing, set his fork down with calm precision, then lifted his eyes. Officer Tanner. His tone wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't defiant. It was a simple acknowledgement, and that enraged Tanner even more. "You eat well for a man who disrespects authority," Tanner growled. "I haven't disrespected anyone," Darius said. "You question me." I answered honestly. "You held my wrist." "You tried to strike me," Darius replied. I prevented further escalation. The cafeteria was dead silent. Tanner's face twisted. He leaned forward and pressed a hand to Darius's shoulder with a grip too tight to be professional. "You think you're special, Holt?" "No." "You think you're better than me?" "No." "Then why won't you break?" Darius stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Then he said softly, "Because you're not the first man to test me." Tanner's breath caught. Darius didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his posture. He spoke with the clarity of a man who had nothing to prove. "And you won't be the last." The room froze. Tanner ripped his hand away and slammed it on the table. "Stand up. Now!" Kai panicked. "Darius, don't." Darius raised a hand gently to stop him. He stood. Quietly, calmly. The entire cafeteria leaned in like witnesses to an execution they couldn't look away from. Tanner walked around the table and stepped squarely in front of him. They stood eye to eye, Tanner seething, Darius steady. "You think you're tough?" Tanner spat. "Let's see how tough you are when you're on the ground." He shoved Darius, a hard, two-handed push square in the chest. Most men would have stumbled. Most men would have lost balance. Most men would have reacted. Darius did none of those things. He didn't move. Not an inch. Tanner pushed again. Harder. Darius absorbed the force. His boots planted like anchors. His muscles didn't tense. His jaw didn't clench. He simply stayed upright, breathing steadily, watching Tanner like a man watching a storm he'd already survived once. Inmates whispered urgently. "What the hell? He's rooted to the floor." "What kind of training does that?" "He ain't normal, bro. He's something else." Tanner roared. "Move!" He shoved Darius one more time. Full strength, both hands, pure rage. That's when the cafeteria saw the first crack in Tanner's confidence. When he pushed, Darius's body didn't budge, but Tanner's did. His feet slipped. He stumbled a half-step backward. The imbalance made him look small, clumsy, weak. And in prison, looking weak can be fatal. Humiliation washed over Tanner like a wave. "Enough!" he barked. "Grab him." Two guards hesitated. Simmons froze. Peterson took one cautious step. They didn't want to do this. Every guard saw what happened. Every guard saw that Darius wasn't resisting. But they also saw Tanner's fury. Tanner lunged forward and jabbed a finger in Darius's face. "You want to act like some trained soldier? Then fight me?" Darius spoke clearly, quietly, unshaken. "I won't fight you." "Why?" Tanner snarled. "Because you want me to." The truth landed like a blow. Tanner roared and swung. A fist thrown in pure rage. The entire cafeteria gasped. Kai closed his eyes. Bruno leaned forward. Simmons shouted, "Tanner, no!" The punch came fast, but not fast enough. Darius didn't dodge. He guided. At the last second, he raised one hand, caught Tanner's wrist with gentle precision, and redirected the punch past his own shoulder. Tanner's momentum carried him forward, off balance, stumbling 2 full steps before catching himself. He turned humiliated, breathing hard. Darius looked at him. "Stop," he said softly. That single word was enough to make every guard freeze. Tanner's face reddened. You think you're better than me. You think you're smarter. You think you're a damn soldier." Darius interrupted quietly. The room stilled like a dead heartbeat. "What?" Tanner whispered. "I was a soldier," Darius said, voice steady. "And I led men through situations worse than this place could ever imagine." A stunned silence spread through the cafeteria. Darius stepped forward, not threateningly, just firmly enough that Tanner instinctively backed up. "But I don't fight civilians. I don't fight untrained men. And I don't fight out of ego." He held Tanner's gaze without blinking. "I fight when lives are on the line, not pride." Tanner's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Darius stepped back. "This ends now. You need to step away." Tanner looked around. The inmates stared at him, not Darius. They weren't looking at fear. They were looking at failure. Tanner stumbled back a step, breathing unevenly, then stormed out of the cafeteria. No one clapped. No one cheered. But every inmate understood the shift. Tanner wasn't hunting Darius anymore. He was running from him. And Darius Holt, the quiet inmate, the calm man, the one they all underestimated, had just revealed the first hint of the truth. He wasn't built like them. He wasn't built like the guards. He wasn't built like anyone in Stonewater. He was a leader of soldiers. And men like him didn't break. When Darius spoke of his past, he never used the language of medals. He used the language of details. The small, precise things that only a man who'd been responsible for other men's lives would remember. The smell of diesel after a convoy ambush, the way a radio hissed when someone broke under stress, the exact angle a door opened when a hallway was about to turn dangerous. He never boasted. He cataloged. Precision is a kind of humility, and Darius carried it like a map, before Stonewater took the shape of his present life. He was Captain Darius Holt, company commander in a unit the Army kept lean and quiet. Men followed him because his voice never needed to be loud. He led by being first to move and last to complain. His leadership was a practice of small mercies, checking boots before patrol, sharing the last ration when tempers frayed, staying awake while the men slept. That's how you keep a team breathing through long nights where nothing about the world let you sleep later. There was one mission carved into him like a scar you forget to tell people about, the convoy that changed everything. It was supposed to be simple. Escort a humanitarian team through a contested corridor to reach a remote clinic. Diplomatic, routine, the kind of operation run on maps and checklists. The village they were heading to had been promised aid by contractors who wanted good press and tax credits more than logistics. Darius briefed his men in the pre-dawn dark. Routes, checkpoints, rules of engagement, less a list of commands and a vow. Keep the civilians safe. Bring them home. They moved like clockwork. The convoy threaded through dusk, the sun rising into a sky that smelled of metal and heat. Halfway through, the air changed, thin, sudden, like a hell breath. A roadside IED detonated near the third vehicle. Chaos is efficient. It travels faster than orders. Men shouted, boots slid, a truck tipped. The insurgents that struck were patient and brutal, the kind of ambush that existed because someone had forgotten the cost of patience. Darius did what commanders do. He controlled the scene. He moved through the smoke and the cries. He called medevac. He counted the living. He found survivors in patients' eyes and named them one by one. They salvaged the convoy by muscle and discipline. They made a perimeter around the clinic and dug in for the evening. The first night after an ambush is always the longest. You sleep with one ear open and with the knowledge that the next dawn will test you again. The problem wasn't the ambush. The problem was the truth that revealed itself afterward. The humanitarian team's paperwork wasn't clean. The contractor in charge, the man in crisp shirts who smiled too smoothly while Darius and his men bled and worked, had been shipping more than medicine. Darius saw crates mislabeled, manifest smudged, men in uniforms who didn't belong in any roster. He found phones with contact lists that didn't match NGOs and receipts that paid for too many things that didn't add up. Darius raised it with his chain of command quietly, the way you hand your superior an ugly truth and hope they don't ask for a signature. He expected an inquiry. He expected policies. He expected bureaucracy to step in and correct the shadow. Instead, he found denial and silence. Someone higher up smiled the way men smile, when they're good at burying things. The contractor had friends in places where contracts get approved, and friends who liked the headlines money bought. The problem, Darius learned, wasn't that the convoy had been ambushed. The problem was a web that made the ambush a convenience, and the truth a threat. He had a choice. Sign the paperwork and keep the story tidy for the cameras, or protect the civilians and the truth, and risk everything below the lid of the system he had sworn to serve. He chose the people he could see. Darius and his team refused to let the contractor's men leave with crates intact. They rifled through boxes and found weapons, false IDs, and satellite phones wired straight to men Darius had spent a year putting people like him behind. He called it in. He sat in a tent while his superior drafted statements and then circled a red line under one paragraph that promised to bury the evidence. "We can't afford this," the superior said. "The repercussions are bigger than you can imagine." Darius's answer was simple and immediate. "Then do the right thing." There are moments when orders end and moral choices begin, and Darius had never been one to step out of line when it meant a child lived. The ripple began small, a reprimand letter here, a passive-aggressive reassignment there, then the quiet shifting of men around him that made the unit smaller overnight. The contractor made a few calls. The men in crisp shirts smiled more and paid bribes like loose coins. The press never noticed. But someone noticed the one captain who refused to close his eyes. They found a charge that fit like a glove where truth had a scar, obstruction of operations, endangering Allied assets, conduct unbecoming. The paperwork was precise and merciless. The language of bureaucracy suffocates easily, and that's what they use: procedures, terms, layers of documents, until a man can't find his face in a stack of paper. Darius fought it, not with shouting. He didn't have the luxury of a loud fight. He fought with witnesses, with reports, with men he'd saved whose lips trembled at the idea of speaking against contractors. He believed the system would correct itself. He believed in the machinery because he'd lived in it and trusted it to be better than rumor. But the system chose its friends. They manufactured a drop weapon. They twisted an incident into a crime. They painted Darius as a man who had crossed a line and needed to be removed for the sake of order. It was elegant cruelty, an operation run with the same precision Darius once admired. When the charges came, they came quietly and efficiently. There was no press conference, no military parade. One morning he was Captain Holt. The next, he was a name that fit a file. He was discharged. The contractor moved on, contracts renewed. The village received delayed aid, with no journalists waiting for trucks. The men who followed Darius found themselves reassigned, moved, or quietly encouraged to leave. It broke him in ways public records wouldn't show. Not because he lost rank or badge, but because the truth he had given himself to was bartered away. He had spent a life teaching men to trust orders and expect justice to follow. The moment he saw how a system could sell its soul, he realized he hadn't been training soldiers to obey a machine. He'd been threading humanity into men who needed it most. He walked away because he had to, not out of surrender, but out of an obligation to the moral line he couldn't cross. He refused to be complicit, and for that, they remove him. The official story said a breakdown, a mental lapse, an inability to work under stress. The men who knew better called it what it was: consequence. After discharge, Darius tried to complain. He went through the channels like he'd been taught, but the channels redirected him to walls and polite men with polished shoes. Stonewater changed after Tanner's cafeteria meltdown. Not officially, not in paperwork, not in any report. Those always stayed clean. But the air changed. Guards watched Darius differently. Inmates spoke softer when he walked by. Even Bruno, who respected strength above all, gave him a nod that wasn't dominance or threat. It was acknowledgement. But Tanner, he didn't heal. He simmered. Humiliation in front of inmates wasn't something a man like Tanner could swallow. It gnawed at him hour after hour. His authority wasn't just dented. It was bleeding, and he blamed one man for the wound: Darius Holt. By day 5, Tanner's anger had lost its shape and become something more dangerous. Intention. He stopped shouting. He stopped pacing. He stopped confronting Darius in public. He became quiet. And in Stonewater, Tanner silent was worse than Tanner furious. That evening, during final count, Tanner intercepted Simmons near the guard break room. "We're doing this," Tanner muttered. Simmons frowned. "Doing what?" You know what? Simmons shook his head quickly. No, I'm not getting involved in your mess. The man didn't do anything wrong. Tanner stepped closer. He embarrassed me. And you embarrass yourself. Simmons shot back. Everyone saw it. Tanner's eyes narrowed. No anger, just a cold calculation. I don't care what you do. But tonight, Block D needs a reminder of who runs this place. Simmons hesitated. Tanner, don't drag the inmates into this. Tanner smirked. Not the inmates. Just one. He left the room before Simmons could reply. In Block D, Darius sat on the lower bunk of his cell, with the door open for evening movement. Kai paced nervously in front of him. You feel it, right? Kai asked, the way the block's different? Yes, Darius said calmly. And Tanner's been quiet. Yes. Kai swallowed. That scares me more than when he was yelling. Darius nodded. Silence is a tactic. So what does that mean? Kai whispered. It means, Darius said, looking toward the hallway. Something is coming. As if summoned by the words, Bruno appeared outside the cell. He leaned on the frame, arms crossed, expression serious. Tanner's planning something. Bruno said, no hesitation. Darius looked up. You heard? No. I saw. Bruno jerked his chin toward the corridor. He was talking with the guards who owe him favors. Kai's eyes widened. What kind of favors? Bruno shrugged. Enough to bend rules. Darius stood. What did he say? Not much, Bruno replied. But he kept saying tonight. And he kept pointing toward the showers. Kai froze. The showers? But the cameras don't cover the centers. Only the entrances. Bruno nodded. Exactly. Darius understood immediately. The showers were the blind spot. The place where guards could respond to a disturbance without footage. A place where anything could happen and be written off in paperwork. Tanner was smart enough to avoid a public confrontation after cafeteria, but stupid enough to think a blind spot could hide intent. Darius exhaled slowly. He wants me alone. Bruno didn't sugarcoat it. He wants you hurt. Or worse. Later that night, the block settled into routine. Showers were open for the last hour before lights out. Inmates rotated through in small groups. The guards watched lazily. Most were counting minutes until shift change. Darius walked toward the shower entry, towel in hand, posture normal, expression unreadable. He already knew what awaited him. He had accepted that some choices needed to be faced, not avoided. Kai rushed up behind him. Don't go. Please. Please just wait until morning. Darius turned. If I wait, he'll try another place. Another time. And someone else might get caught in it. Kai's voice cracked. But, Kai, Darius interrupted softly. Fear is normal, but letting fear choose for you isn't. Bruno appeared a second later. Hope, I don't like this. I know, Darius said. Bruno swallowed. You sure you can handle this guy? Tanner's not like inmates. He's protected. Darius met Bruno's eyes. Bruno, if I wanted to hurt Tanner, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Bruno blinked, then nodded slowly. Darius stepped inside the shower area. The door closed behind him with a heavy clang. Inside, the room was dim and full of steam, the humming fluorescent lights flickering faintly against wet tiles. Water dripped from pipes overhead like a metronome counting down. Darius walked to the center. He didn't have to wait long. From the far side of the room, footsteps echoed. Tanner stepped through the steam with two guards behind him. Both younger, both uncomfortable, both pulled into something they didn't truly understand. Tanner smirked. Thought you might skip tonight. Darius shook his head slowly. No, I'm here. Tanner's eyes gleamed with triumph. Good, because this has been building for days. Darius glanced at the guards. You brought witnesses. Tanner scoffed. Witnesses? They're here to hold you down if you get smart. Darius's voice was quiet. I won't fight you. Then you'll bleed, Tanner said, stepping forward. The younger guard hesitated. Officer Tanner, maybe we shouldn't... Shut up, Tanner snapped. He looked at Darius. You made me look weak. No, Darius said. You did that to yourself. Tanner lunged. A fist swung, fast and sloppy. Darius didn't dodge. He stepped backward at an angle so subtle it looked like a shift in posture, not an evasive move. The punch flew past him, Tanner stumbling slightly from his own momentum. Tanner roared and swung again. Darius redirected it with a gentle palm, barely a touch. Tanner's arm flew wide, his balance faltering. "Fight me!" Tanner shouted, frustrated. "No," Darius said calmly. Tanner swung again and again, wild, untrained, furious. Darius avoided every hit with the smallest movements possible. Shifts of weight, pivots to the heel, slight tilts to the shoulder. The guards watched, stunned. Tanner grew desperate, grabbing a loose shower pipe and swinging it like a club. Darius didn't move, until he had to. As the pipe came down, Darius stepped in, caught Tanner's wrist with single clean motion, twisted, not hard, not brutally, and disarmed him effortlessly. The pipe clanged to the floor. Tanner gasped in pain, dropping to one knee. Darius looked down at him. "This ends tonight," Darius said softly. "Or what?" Tanner hissed. "Or you destroy yourself," Darius replied. "And you don't need my help doing that." Tanner stared up, sweat pouring down his face, anger collapsing into something more fragile. Humiliation, confusion, fear. The younger guard finally stepped in. "Officer Tanner, stand down." Tanner shoved him away. "No. He's..." Darius let go of his wrist gently and stepped back. "I won't fight you," he said again. And for the first time since the cafeteria, Tanner realized a terrible truth. Darius Holt had never been a threat. He was a reminder of everything Tanner wasn't. A reminder of the discipline, control, and strength Tanner pretended to have but never earned. A reminder that some men don't need violence to dominate. They just need calm. Tanner backed away slowly, clutching his wrist, eyes shaking. The guards didn't touch Darius. They didn't say a word, because they had seen something they couldn't explain. Not violence, not rebellion, not aggression. Something more dangerous. Mastery. The morning after the shower incident, Stonewater felt unsettled in a way that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with truth. Rumors traveled through the block before breakfast even started. Inmates spoke in low, deliberate tones, like men repeating something sacred. Tanner swung a pipe. And Holt disarmed him without hitting back. Didn't even break a sweat. Didn't even raise his voice. Some men laughed in disbelief. Some whispered in awe. Others simply stared at Darius like he had become something mythic overnight. A different kind of force. One they didn't have a name for. But Tanner heard the whispers too. And humiliation dragged him deeper into the worst version of himself. In the guard break room, Tanner kicked open the door so hard the handle cracked against the wall. Graves, Simmons, and Peterson all looked up at the same time. Peterson immediately sighed. "Here we go." Tanner glared at him. "You shut your mouth." Graves put down his coffee. "What's your problem now?" "My problem," Tanner snapped, "is that an inmate made me look like an idiot again." Simmons shifted uncomfortably. He had seen the shower scene firsthand. He knew the truth Tanner didn't want to face. "Tanner," he said quietly, "you need to let this go." "No," Tanner hissed. "I need respect." "And you think beating Holt will get you that?" Simmons asked. Tanner slammed both palms on the table, making Graves jump. "He's laughing at me." "No," Simmons said calmly. "He's not." Tanner's eyes twitched. "He's mocking me without saying a damn word." Peterson leaned back. "Because you keep picking fights you can't win." Tanner spun toward him. "You think he can take me?" Peterson snorted. "We all saw it. He didn't even try." Those words were gasoline. Tanner grabbed Peterson by the collar. "Say that again." Graves stood. "Tanner, enough." Tanner shoved Peterson away violently and paced like a caged animal. "This is not about a fight," he said. "This is about control. I'm not letting some quiet black convict make me look weak in my own damn prison." Simmons stared at him, then maybe stopped provoking him. Tanner froze, turned slowly. "You think I'm the problem?" Simmons didn't blink. You are. Tanner's anger shifted suddenly, no longer targeted at Darius, but anyone who questioned his authority. And that was far more dangerous. He breathed heavily, grabbed his baton, and pointed it at Simmons. You're either with me or against me. Simmons shook his head. I'm not choosing sides. I'm choosing sense. Tanner laughed, an unhinged, low laugh that made both Graves and Peterson glance at each other nervously. Well, Tanner said, I know how to fix that. Later that day in Block D, Darius followed his routine as if nothing had happened. He swept the floor outside his cell. He folded his blanket. He helped an older inmate settle a dispute with a younger one. His presence wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Kai whispered beside him, Word is Tanner lost it this morning. I expected he would, Darius said. Bruno leaned on the bars across from them. You need to be careful. Holt, he's not thinking straight. Darius nodded. I know. You hear the latest rumor? Bruno asked. No. He's trying to pull other guards in. Wants to isolate you, corner you, break you. Darius didn't respond. Kai lowered his voice. Why don't you tell the warden? Or ask for transfer? Or something. Darius shook his head slowly. Running from one man doesn't solve anything. And teaching others that fear controls us will only make things worse. Bruno looked at him for a long moment. You ever get scared, Holt? Darius thought for a moment. Then he said quietly, Yes, but fear serves me. I don't serve it. Bruno nodded. That's some soldier stuff right there. Darius didn't argue. Meanwhile, Tanner escalated. He cornered Graves outside the administrative wing. You're with me, right? He demanded. Graves shook his head. Man, no. You're picking the wrong enemy. He's playing you all, Tanner insisted. He wants control. Graves scoffed. He wants peace. You want control. Next, Tanner cornered two newer guards, Ryan and Lucas. Young, inexperienced, desperate to look tough. You want respect here? Tanner told them. Stick with me, and you'll get it. Stick with the others, and you'll be cleaning vomit off the floors during night shift. The young guards hesitated, but not enough. Insecurity is contagious. And Tanner knew which men were vulnerable. Within an hour, he had two guards on his side, men who didn't understand what they were walking into. That evening, Simmons found Darius in the yard. He approached quietly, glancing over his shoulder. Holt, we need to talk. Darius stopped walking. What is it? Tanner's trying to corner you tonight. I know. Simmons blinked. You know? How? You told me without meaning to, Darius said gently. Your posture, the way you walked here, the tone in your voice. Simmons stared, overwhelmed by a realization he had been trying to avoid. This man wasn't just trained. He was trained to read people. Holt, Simmons said, voice tight. I don't want anything bad to happen. Tanner's out of line, but he's my colleague. Darius nodded. I understand. If he corners you, Simmons whispered, don't fight. Please. They'll use it against you. Darius looked straight into Simmons's eyes. If he tries to kill me, I will defend myself, but I won't attack him. Simmons inhaled sharply. God help us all. In the guard tower, Tanner watched Darius and Simmons talking. His face twisted. There it is, Tanner muttered. Manipulating guards. Playing innocent. Making me look like the villain. Beside him, the young guards, Ryan and Lucas, shifted uncomfortably. I'm telling you, Tanner whispered. Holt is dangerous. He's controlling the block. He's got inmates under his thumb. He's a threat to all of us. Ryan swallowed. How do you know? Tanner stepped closer, eyes blazing. Because when I look at him, I see a man who's not afraid of death. And anyone like that is capable of anything. The young guards didn't argue, but their silence was consent. Tanner smiled. Phase 1 was complete. Night fell, heavy and slow. Block D settled into its dim blue glow, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing against cold concrete. Inmates whispered in their cells, all aware that something was coming. Darius sat on his bunk, elbows resting on his knees, eyes on the floor. Kai approached the bars. Whatever happens tonight, Kai whispered. "I'm not leaving your side." Darius shook his head. "You must. This is not your fight." Kai's voice broke. "But you protected all of us." "And I will continue to," Darius said softly, "but not by putting you in danger." Kai wiped his eyes and stepped back. Bruno walked over next, arms crossed. "You're not dying tonight," he said firmly. "I have no intention of dying," Darius replied. Bruno nodded. "Good." He paused and added, "And neither does Tanner." Darius looked up. Bruno's voice lowered. "Because if Tanner comes after you, he ain't walking out the same man." Darius looked down again. He didn't want that. But Tanner was choosing a path none of them could walk him away from. And somewhere deep inside Stonewater, the storm Tanner had created finally began to break. He gathered his two guards. He grabbed his baton. He walked toward Block D with a purpose that looked like authority from far away, but like desperation up close. Tanner was coming. And Darius Holt knew exactly what that meant. The real confrontation hadn't begun yet. It was only being prepared. Night fell like a curtain stitched from steel and concrete. The lights in Block D hummed, and the pipes whispered in the walls as if they too were bracing for what was coming. Tanner walked with confidence that had nothing to do with intercom. It was manufactured swagger fueled by a rehearsed plan and the fragile fuel of wounded pride. Ryan and Lucas flanked him, hands clenched on nightsticks that felt heavier than they looked, eager to prove themselves if only by association. He had the tower's radio, a fake call ready in his mouth, and the knowledge of blind spots in the facility that paperwork never bothered to mention. Darius sat on his bunk with his back straight, towel folded over his knee like a soldier folding a flag. He had washed, dressed, and prepared himself the way he always did, methodically, quietly, no dramatics, no speeches. Kai watched him from the top bunk, eyes rimmed with sleep and fear. "If they come, stay with me," Kai whispered. Darius didn't smile, but he laid a steady hand on the kid's shoulder. "If they come, you go to the window and make noise. Draw attention. Promise me that." Kai nodded like a boy giving orders before a drill. "I promise." Tanner's plan was simple in its ugliness. Create a disturbance near the laundry transfer, call an assist code, have Ryan and Lucas block exits while he brandished authority, and made a scene that would justify dragging Darius into the paperwork machine as a violent instigator. He practiced his lines in his head, the phrases that sounded official in a clip of radio speak and cruelty. He walked into the corridor like a man who'd rehearsed victory. The first step was noise, a muffled shout in the laundry wing. Disturbance in D block. Traveled through the facility's intercom, like the start of fireworks. The lights in the corridor flickered, as if responding to the same script. Guards moved with rote efficiency, forms and faces passing through panels of motion. But Tanner had picked a moment when staff would be thin and response slow. Darius heard the shout and rose without hesitation, towel still in hand. He moved toward the door, because he never ran from a call for trouble. He stepped toward it because he walked with purpose, and purpose gets to the center faster than panic ever can. He met Bruno in the hall. The man's face was a hard, carved thing. Bruno nodded once. "I've got your back," he said. Darius simply nodded. He didn't need promises. He needed presence. The laundry wing was steam and shadows, the kind of space that hides evidence and welcomes lies. Tanner had already positioned his men near the entrances. He staged a scuffle with a willing inmate actor, a petty thug who'd been promised a favor, and called at the chain that a dangerous inmate was trying to incite violence. Ryan and Lucas blocked the doors away men block exits before a storm, intentionally slow to make the yard's response delayed and clumsy. Tanner stepped forward with a brazen voice. "You, hands behind your back. Now!" He pointed at Darius the way one points at a shape they don't want to study. The cameras above the laundry didn't point where the action would be. They'd never been wired to see the corner Tanner chose as a stage. Darius obeyed the command without drama. He placed his hands behind him and turned slowly, letting the scene exist in light and sound without feeding into it. The guards moved in with practiced motions, but the air, thick from the steam and the anticipation, had a different pulse now. It was waiting for the scrap of violence it would rename as proof. Tanner grabbed Darius's arm with a grip loud enough for the metal ring to sing. "You started this," he barked. "We'll place you in handcuffs and write it up. You won't walk out of here." His voice had the brittle certainty of a man betting on paper and perception. Darius didn't jerk away. He didn't curse. He turned his head and looked at Tanner, as if measuring a man who'd spent too long believing his own stories. "Put the cuffs on," he said quietly. "But know this. If any man here lays a hand on a kid or a man who's not fighting, I will not be the only one accountable." That sentence landed like a second bell in the laundry wing. One for the guards and one for the inmates who'd gather like gulls on a roof to watch a storm. Ryan moved to clip the cuffs. He was a younger guard who had learned how to follow orders and ignore doubt. When his hand trembled, Tanner barked, "Do it!" The cuffs clicked. Metal kissed skin. The sound echoed. Then something shifted. A voice came from the far entry. The warden's voice, crisp and unexpected. "What's happening down there?" Warden McBride stood framed in the doorway, arms folded, shadow cutting the steam. He marched in like a man walking into a rehearsal he hadn't approved. Tanner stepped forward, chest heaving, ready with his script. "Warden, there's a disturbance." This inmate, Holt, was being uncooperative and aggressive. McBride's eyes cut to Darius. They weren't the eyes of a man looking for paperwork. They were the eyes of someone searching for truth in a room of pretense. "Holt," he said slowly, "stand up." Darius rose without a fight. He faced the warden the same way he faced everyone else. Steady, honest, measured. McBride walked the perimeter of the stage scene, watching the actors and the props. He looked at Tanner, at the reluctant inmate who'd been paid provoke, at Ryan and Lucas, whose faces had gone pale. He looked at the laundry ceiling where cameras cast their indifferent glow. Then he looked back at Darius. "Describe what happened," McBride said. Tanner launched into his practice account, his sentences clipped and precise, designed to fit forms. But Warden McBride listened the way a man listens when he's both tired and not willing to be fooled. When Tanner finished, McBride didn't speak for a long breath. "Where are the injuries?" McBride asked finally. "Where are the witnesses who saw the initial aggression?" Tanner faltered, unable to conjure evidence that would survive a close look. The paid inmate stammered. I started on orders." The lie thinned like cheap paint under a hot lamp. The young guard shuffled. McBride turned to Ryan and Lucas. "Did you block exits to detain an inmate based on a stage disturbance?" Both shook their heads, burned by the recognition that they'd been manipulated by pride. McBride's face hardened. He looked at Tanner. "You better explain yourself." Tanner's bravado dissolved into something smaller. He jabbed a thumb toward Darius. "He humiliated me. He undermined my authority." He couldn't finish. The warden's stare closed the gap. Back against the wall, Tanner, McBride said, "You will write a full incident report and explain why you recruited an inmate to stage violence. You'll also be escorting the thug to solitary for the night for participating in your scheme." Tanner's shoulders flared. Then they drooped. The young guards exhaled like men stumbling out of fog. The staged inmate nodded, eyes wide, guilt and fear painting his face. Darius kept his hands behind his back even as the cuffs were removed. He didn't need them. The warden's presence had dissolved the moment into the truth it always tried to hide. Pride had plotted, manipulation had been the tool, and a man's dignity had been the cost. McBride stepped closer to Darius, voice low enough for only him to hear. "You did right by not rising to it." Darius inclined his head once. "I'm not here to trade blows for pride. I'm here to survive with my principles intact." The warden looked at Tanner, then at Ryan and Lucas, then at the stage thug. "Reports," he said. "And you, Supervisor Peterson, will review every camera angle in this wing tonight." The laundry wing emptied as the officers processed the fallout. Bruno appeared in the doorway, an unreadable expression on his face. Kai slid up beside Darius, eyes wet with relief. "You okay?" he asked. Darius loosened his shoulders for the first time in hours. "Yes," he said, "for now." Tanner left the wing like a man who had just watched the floor drop beneath him. He had planned to make Darius look like a monster. Instead, he'd been exposed as a man whose armor was paper thin. Outside, the night air felt sharp and honest. Stonewater was a place that swallowed men, or so it thought. But tonight, pride had been stopped by a few simple things. A man who refused to be baited, a warden who refused to be lied to, and a kid who kept a promise to make noise if things went wrong. The breaking point had arrived, but not in the way Tanner expected. It had not forced Darius into bloodshed. It had forced the institution to choose between the narrative it wanted and the one that was true. The choice had been made. And for Darius Holt, the real fight remained the quiet one inside him, keeping the past under control and choosing restraint when the world demanded otherwise. The night closed. The block settled. But the taste of truth lingered like a salt burn on the lip, sharp, cleansing, and not easily forgotten. By the next morning, Stonewater Correctional Facility was no longer the same. The event in the laundry wing had spread to the prison tiers like a whispered gospel, details bending, sharpening, and echoing inside every cell. Men who never spoke to each other now exchanged glances heavy with understanding. Those who had been indifferent to Darius Holt suddenly watched him with something close to reverence. And those who once feared Tanner now felt a dangerous curiosity. What does a man become when his power collapses? Darius moved through the motions of the morning count with the same quiet precision he always carried, standing straight, offering no challenge, speaking only when asked. But the guard saw something different now. The ones who had mocked him or doubted him kept their eyes lowered. The new recruits glanced with caution, as if assessing whether the calm man was someone they'd underestimated. Kai hovered close behind Darius as they walked toward the dining hall. The kid's nerves hadn't faded from the night before. "He's not done," Kai whispered. "You know that, right? Tanner's the kind who gets cornered and bites harder." Darius nodded. "Yes, he's not done, but he's losing ground." Kai frowned. Losing ground doesn't stop a desperate man. Bruno joined them, walking with the heavy, slow gait, a man who understood violence more intimately than most. "He's right," Bruno muttered. "Tanner isn't sleeping. He's not thinking. He's drowning, and drowning men flail. Hard." Darius took in their words the way a strategist absorbs terrain. Not with fear, just calculation. "We'll deal with him," Darius said quietly. "But right now, he's dealing with something worse than us." "What's that?" Kai asked. "Truth." Tanner's shift began before sunrise. He came in through the side employee entrance, jaw clenched so tight it left a vein pulsing near his temple. His uniform looked disheveled, his eyes red. The man hadn't slept, he couldn't. His mind replayed the warden's face, the disgust in those eyes, the way Ryan and Lucas avoided looking at him as they filed their reports. He stormed into the break room and found Simmons already drinking coffee. Simmons didn't speak first. He didn't have to. Tanner radiated tension like heat from a burning stove. "You see the reports?" Tanner growled. Simmons nodded. "Yeah." "You talked to the warden?" "Yeah." "And?" Tanner demanded. Simmons took a sip. "You're lucky he didn't suspend you on the spot." Tanner barked out a humorless laugh. "Suspend me? Suspend me? For what? Try control an inmate." Simmons set the cup down. "For using the prison like your personal arena. For lying. For staging a fight." He lowered his voice. "For losing your damn grip." Tanner's face turned a deeper shade of red. "He's making me look like the enemy." "No," Simmons said. "You did that yourself." Tanner shook, trembling with rage. "I'm going to file a grievance. I'm going to request disciplinary action against Holt. I'm not letting this go." Simmons leaned back, something like pity flickering in his eyes. "Tanner, you can't win this. The cameras didn't catch what you hoped, but they caught enough. The inmate confessed you bribed him. Ryan and Lucas cracked. And Holt, he exhaled. He didn't fight you, not even once." "That's the point," Tanner shouted. "He's manipulating everyone. He's dangerous." Simmons looked up, eyes narrowing. "He's not dangerous because of violence. He's dangerous because he's better than you." Tanner froze. The words hit harder than any punch. Simmons pushed his chair back. "Take a few days off. Cool down, or this'll end worse for you." Tanner glared at him, hatred simmering beneath the surface. Then he muttered, almost too quietly. "I'm going to finish this." Simmons closed his eyes for a brief moment. He knew then that reason had left Tanner entirely. Meanwhile, Warden McBride reviewed the incident reports in his office. He read each guard's statement carefully, line by line, detail by detail. Ryan's shaky handwriting, Lucas's reluctant honesty, the inmate's confession, Simmons's clear account, Tanner's tense, defensive report that contradicted every other piece. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. He had seen officers like Tanner before. Too insecure to handle authority, too proud to accept reality, too volatile to stay in their position for long. A knock sounded at the door. "Enter." Simmons stepped in. "Warden, you wanted to see me?" McBride gestured for him to sit. "I'm considering removing Tanner from Block D." Simmons nodded slowly. "He won't take it well." "I know," McBride said, "but I'm not leaving a powder keg in the yard." Simmons hesitated. "If you pull him out, he'll blame Holt. He already does." McBride exhaled. "That's the trouble with weak men. They need someone to blame." He tapped the file. "Holt reminds me of a soldier I once knew. Same control, same discipline." Simmons nodded. "He's different." "Yes," McBride said quietly. "And Tanner resents that difference." Simmons looked uneasy. "You think Tanner might try something again?" McBride didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the yard, where inmates lined up in their orange uniforms. "He'll try," McBride finally said. "But next time it won't be a stage fight. It'll be a corner." Simmons swallowed. "And Holt?" "He won't start a fight," McBride said. "But if Tanner pushes hard enough." The warden closed the folder. "He might finish one." Back in Block D, the whispers turned into something more solid. Respect. Men nodded at Darius as he passed. Not fear, not reverence. Respect. The kind earned from calm strength, not performance. Kai clung closer than usual during lunch. "People say Tanner's going nuclear," he whispered. "He's telling the wrong guards the wrong stories." Bruno nodded. "He's weaponizing his ego. That's a dangerous thing." Darius stirred his mashed potatoes slowly. "He's losing control." Bruno scoffed. He already lost it. Darius met Bruno's eyes. "No, losing control is when a man breaks. Tanner hasn't broken yet. He's reaching." "For what?" Kai asked. "For a moment where he can justify anything," Darius said. Kai gulped. "Like what?" Darius's gaze drifted to the far entrance of the cafeteria, where Tanner had just stepped in, eyes locked on him like a predator tracking prey. "Like that," Darius whispered. Tanner walked to the cafeteria with the authority of a man who believed he was unstoppable. Men moved out his path, not out of respect, but out of fear of chaos. He stopped 2 feet from Darius. "Holt," Tanner said, voice low. The cafeteria went silent. "Yes, Officer Tanner?" Darius replied. Tanner leaned down, eyes burning. "You think you won last night?" Darius didn't blink. "No." "You think the warden believes you?" "Yes." Tanner's nostrils flared. "You think this is over?" "No," Darius said calmly. "I think you're reaching for something you shouldn't." Tanner smiled a shaky, twisted smile. "Oh, I'm reaching," he whispered. "And when I grab hold, you're not leaving this prison the same man." Darius's voice didn't rise, didn't harden, didn't shake. "I've left war zones with my mind intact. Officer Tanner, you won't be the one to break me." For the first time, Tanner froze, not from anger, but from the quiet truth in that sentence. He stepped back, and for the first time since his feud began with Darius Holt, Tanner looked afraid. The day the block held its breath arrived like a storm with no thunder, heavy, inevitable, and somehow quiet. Word had spread through Stonewater that Tanner was done playing games. He'd filed grievances, gathered bruised pride into a paper trail, and cultivated allies who didn't mind bending rules when a colleague's ego needed feeding. The guards on Tanner's side walked straighter, their eyes harder. The ones who had seen too much and understood less grew wary and asked for transfers. Inmates read the change in posture like weather, the tilt of a man's head, the set of his jaw. Everyone knew the last act had begun. Darius felt the tension the way a seasoned sailor feels the tide change under his hull. It wasn't that he liked chaos. He disliked it deeply, but he'd spent his life preparing for it. Indeed, measuring his life by the things that required a steady hand. Kai had been unusually pallid that morning, moving slow as if someone had bled his courage dry. Bruno walked rigidly, a sentinel under a sky that might open at any moment. Warden McBride paced more in the office than was his custom, telephone a hand, eyes lined with decisions. He'd warned Tanner, read reports, tried to defuse. The yard responded not with applause, but with an acute awareness. A system was about to be tested. Tanner's plan wasn't subtle. It was a blunt attempt to force a narrative. He would call for a search in Block D, arrange for his cohorts to find contraband in a bunk used by one of Darius's few friends, and stage a conflict that would make Darius appear the aggressor. If paperwork couldn't do it, a shove and a bruise would. He practiced the lines in his head like a sermon. Facts utter, witnesses the position. The camera angles he suspected would remain blind. Pride had simplified his thinking. Where discipline would have paused, pride hammered toward spectacle. The search call came in the late afternoon, routine tone, but with a cadence that sounded like something more. Guards filtered through the block, lights glancing off metal, clipboards clicking. The chosen bunk belonged to a quiet inmate who'd shared coffee with Darius. The small cell where friendships were measured in minor kindnesses was searched with theatrical thoroughness. Tanner's men found what they wanted, a contraband packet tucked behind a vent. Content stage, a packet of white powder that looked convincing enough for a hurried report. The younger guards' faces went pale. Even they could tell the timing was too neat. Darius watched it all with that stillness that kept men guessing. When the cuffs came for his friend, the block murmured, the sound thick with indignation. Kai moved to protest and was gently shoved back by Bruno. "Not yet," Bruno hissed. "Wait and watch." The staging needs witnesses who were not bought. It needed people who would speak for the truth. Tanner stepped forward, chest forward, eyes bright like a predator about to mark territory. "This is the sort of behavior we will not tolerate," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You see this? This is the kind of rot that spreads under the watch of inmates like Holt. He's the one organizing it." Darius's jaw didn't tighten. His voice didn't rise. He simply folded his hands behind him and said, "I don't run contraband." Tanner smiled a hollow smile. "Then prove it. Fight me. Prove you're not hiding something." The yard changed from a hum to a hush. Men stepped back. The accused, Darius's friend, was dragged to the wall. The younger guards looked like deer in headlights. The warden's steps clicked faster as he crossed the yard. Darius then moved toward Tanner. He moved toward the cell, toward his friend, and he said one thing to the assembled officers that landed like a thrown gauntlet. "If you prosecute him without evidence, you make this place a lie. If you want to find contraband, search openly. If you want justice, find proof. I won't trade my integrity for your spectacle." Tanner spat. "So you decline to fight?" "I'm declining to feed an injustice," Darius replied. "Fight me, and you get what you want." A headline. "Don't fight, and maybe, just maybe, you find what you actually should have found months ago, accountability." That seemed to rile Tanner into a fury that bypassed reason. He reached for his baton, but before he could swing, the warden's voice cut through the air like a bell. "Enough." Warden McBride had a presence that was both small and absolute. He'd watched the laundry episode unfold, read the reports, listened to men in his charge, and felt how the institution threatened to be used as a bully stage. He walked up to Tanner and said, flat and precise, "Ted, stand down." Tanner's face crumpled in rage. "Warden, he's taunting me. You'll write a report," McBride said. "You'll relinquish your baton, and you'll stand outside the block for 48 hours. You will not approach any inmate without a supervisor." It was a command meant to protect Darius and to remove the stage from which Tanner could perform. Tanner's protest turned to sputters, and a few guards' eyes flicked away in shame. The younger ones lowered their gaze entirely, uncertain, caught between loyalty and the truth that had exposed them. "You can't do this," Tanner hissed. "You'll see, this isn't over. I'll make sure he pays." McBride's face didn't change. You'll file your report. Then you'll go. If you attempt anything else, I will press charges. Tanner stormed off, fists clenching and unclenching, as if he was trying to hold an animal in his hands. The warden remained between Darius and the lingering officers, a human line drawn. But the confrontation hadn't truly ended in the yard. As Tanner retreated, the inmates began murmuring. Not jeers, not cheers, but a steady rising of acknowledgement. They had watched a man try to weaponize a system against another man, and be stopped by the very system he tried to manipulate. It was a rare thing. Justice administered in view, corrected in front of a crowd. It felt dangerous and fragile and glorious. Bruno approached Darius then, steady as a shadow. "You okay?" he asked. Darius looked at him and Kai both. "Yes," he said simply. "For now." Later, in the dim of the block, Darius sat on his bunk with Kai at his side. The kid's hands trembled. The adrenaline didn't leave in hours. "Why didn't you hit him?" Kai asked when the block finally quieted. "You could have ended it." Darius considered the low ceiling, the single bulb that hummed like a slow heart. "Because if I had, we have traded one kind of injustice for another. We have become what they wanted us to be. Just another story in a file. I refuse to give them that." Kai nodded slowly, struggling to reconcile lessons of courage with lessons of restraint. Bruno's voice cut softly in the background. "You did more than fight him. You taught him a new kind of defeat." Days later, petitions from other guards and complaints filtered in. Tanner was reassigned pending investigation. The manufactured contraband was traced back to the staged inmates' cooperation. The younger guards' reports were reviewed. Warden McBride placed tighter protocols on searches and reminded staff that authority without evidence was a dangerous thing. And the block settled into a new rhythm, one less about posturing and more about small, steady acts of survival. Darius didn't walk away unmarked. He could have exited every report under his name and emerged cleared, but he also knew paperwork rarely unspooled the larger knots. He stayed, folding his blanket with the same exactitude he'd used during 100 maneuvers in other lives. He taught Kai to check his footing, to count breaths, to measure danger with reason instead of impulse. He taught Bruno to keep watch without becoming a warlord. He taught a small group of men how to hold themselves without seducing others into proving something with pain. In the weeks that followed, not every guard changed. Not every abuse stopped. The system still had its fractures. But inside Block D, something had shifted. An informal law. You could be strong without being cruel. You could be disciplined without domination. You could carry history and still choose restraint. Darius Holt's name slowly stopped being a rumor and settled into the less glamorous reality of a man who'd been tested and had chosen a line he would not cross again. He had been a captain once, yes, and the memory of what he'd done and what he refused to do would live with him like an old map. The block respected him not because he had fought, but because when he had a chance to end a man, he chose not to. At night, when the lights dipped and the block quieted, Darius would look at the small candle tucked on the edge of his shelf and think of the convoy, the child, the contractor, the choice. He would count breaths, fold a blanket, and keep watching a world that still grew darker at the edges. That, he decided, was the work he owed his past and the promise he made his future, to survive with his conscience intact, to lead without raising a hand, and to hold his small piece of humanity steady in a place built to erode it. The final confrontation didn't end in a knockout or a headline. It ended in something quieter and, in its own way, more complete. An institutional check, a guard removed, a boy safe, and a man who kept his promise. Stonewater would continue to grind on. Men would still hurt each other. Systems would still bend. But in one small block, the lesson had been learned. Strength is measured in what you refuse to do, not only in what you can do.